From beautiful East Tennessee in the foothills of the Smoky Mountains, you are listening to the Sherry Voluntary Show, and I sure appreciate you spending your time with me today. So for those of you who were familiar with Speaking Freely, the radio show that I used to be a part of, you will recognize my guest extraordinaire today. And for those of you who aren't familiar with him, I may introduce to you the sultry sounds of Mr. Justin Cornett.
I missed you, Sherry.
I missed you too. I know it's good. It's funny because we live in the same town and we used to see each other every single day, and then a lot of times on the weekends.
And spend all our time when we were apart talking.
Yes, so you get used to that, and then life gets busy after the show, and
then and then you're just left with Daniel, and I'm so sorry.
Wow. Daniel does a lot for me, though.
Daniel's a good guy.
Yeah, he's pretty good. He's the, my agent, my producer, my...
marketing department.
Yeah, marketing department, advertiser, all the things. That's what Daniel does. Yeah. Just don't lean into the microphone there, Justin.
I'm sorry.
It's not your fault. We had technical difficulties, so we're having to use a spare mic, and
I'm too dumb to work a mic. I don't have to get close to. That's the.
Well, you're used to the radio show. You have to get right up on the mic. So yeah, I know that was something. But so you actually have a new gig.
I do.
I'm really excited for you about it. And so tell us a little bit about what that is.
I took a position with Americans for Prosperity. Americans for Prosperity is a political organization that concentrates primarily on policies, and tries to basically get the government out of your lives as much as they can.
Yeah.
So move the needle in the right direction, essentially.
So something that I appreciate about AFP is that they really do try to keep partisanship out of it. They just want to have free market policy that is, like you said, getting the government out of your life, letting people, work their own communities out, work out how to live. But
they don't do team politics, I don't think. And I think they draw a lot of negative publicity because of that from the team politics guys, which outnumber everybody in the political arena typically.
Right.
You're right. They're an organization that's advocated for policies that made their companies less money.
Right.
They simply think the government's role should be limited the same way the founders thought it should be limited. And they actively put their money where their mouth is to try to do it. And they are well-funded, well-organized, lots of good tools, and millions of volunteers nationwide.
Yeah, I think they do some really great work. And I know I've taken a class that, it wasn't through AFP, it was through one of their sister affiliate organizations.
Grassroots leadership.
I loved that class. I have only taken the first part of it. I've got to go through the rest of them. But
personally, I think that class should be taught in high school.
It would be awesome.
But if they're not going to teach it in high school, every adult should willingly go and spend a few hours taking this class. I mean, because what it does is it just teaches you a little bit about how the government in your system, in your area works, and how to influence that. And as a country where we don't have kings and the rules are supposed to be left up to the people to decide, we're not doing our part if we're not participating. And that's one of the things that that Americans for Prosperity and their affiliated organizations do work to do, is get people participating, which is huge.
Yeah, I think getting those ideas and the education aspect that they're really big on, especially through the Grassroots Leadership Academy. I don't know. I found it, I was actually pretty impressed and very happy, very pleased to see that, like, the first thing they start out with is a von Mises quote. Right. So I was like, oh yeah, this is the right place for me. And so they didn't, like I said before, they don't push a party, but they're certainly not taking the role of government should have more authority in your life. Let's just say
Exactly.
that.
They're not social planners,
Right.
and they are out to out the social planners.
Hmm.
And nothing would make this my job, my new job, and this
Hmm.
organization's job easier than people understanding their role in participating and actually shaping with the life that they have around them.
Yeah.
They have that ability. And if they choose not to exercise it, somebody's going to.
Yeah.
And those somebodies that are going to have led us to where we are right now.
Right.
So, we want the people, we want the silent majority to speak up and start throwing their weight around and pretend the founding fathers meant something.
Yeah.
And understand, I'm incredibly new to the organization. I've read some literature. I've been like you in those grassroots leaderships groups before I was in working with Americans for Prosperity. But um, generally speaking, I think if you could get the founders' intent of the constitutional republic as it was set up, 250 years ago, that you couldn't make them this group any happier. That's
Yeah.
what we want. Uh,
Yeah.
a life where we get to live our own lives.
Yeah. And I think just to bring it to a practical um, aspect of what to do, because so many people are interested in politics but don't know what to do,
Right.
like more than just going and voting for someone or looking to someone else to do something.
Right.
I think they really concentrate on giving people things to do. Like, I know one of the things that I thought was really interesting in the Grassroots Leadership Academy was that they don't just focus on their own ideas of what would be the best. They look at the strategies that have been employed and what has worked, whether it's from the progressive side or the conservative side.
Right.
So they talked a lot about what progressives have done in the country to enact change within the political system, and how do we use that to enact the change that we want to see. So I thought that was pretty amazing. And I know they talked about even, what's his name? It just left my mind. The guy, Rules for Radicals.
Oh, Saul Alinsky.
Saul Alinsky, yes. They used a
You
lot
have
of...
missed me, haven't
Yeah.
you?
I missed you.
I
It
bet
was
there
in
have been
my
a
head
lot of
that
those moments where you wish I was there.
Yes. So you're my details guy, that's for sure. But I thought that was really interesting that they said this. We recognize these strategies have worked,
Mhm.
and what can we learn from that and use when we're strategizing on how to change policy and change the public opinion. So I think that's really smart. And it's not just saying, well, this guy's a crazy leftist and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's learn from who you got to learn from,
Right.
what works, and then do that.
Well, the principles that the organization operates off of is, as far as I can tell, again. So any AFP employees that would like to correct me, by all means, please do so. But essentially, they embrace the idea that change is necessary. We haven't been making bricks the same way we've been making bricks for the last 1,000 years. There's similarities, but we've gotten way more efficient, and with the efficiency, we've been able to output more. We've made them better. They're less expensive. All those
Stronger,
different things. So
yeah.
that's what innovation does. And I think that as an organization, they understand if they don't innovate, if they allow groupthink or a stagnation to become a major player in their
Mhm.
organization, that it fails.
Yeah.
So, they actively encourage everybody to get involved and help steer the ship. And that doesn't mean if you want to get involved with AFP and push for Medicare for all that you're going to make any headway, because that's like the
That's not what
worst
they're
idea
about.
in the history of the world. But if it's an idea that's in line with their principles and it's something that you want to do, they want to support you
Right.
in that. So,
Mhm.
they are tools for the community to use if they just ask for them.
Right. Yeah. I think what I really appreciate after being involved in party politics for the past year, I really appreciate the clear vision of an organization like AFP, because they know what they want to do. They know where they're going. In party politics, that's not always the case.
Right.
We spend a lot of time fighting each other over just what the planks are going to be and all that craziness. And it's craziness. Like, I don't think you should have that much trouble defining libertarianism, but we're a varied group.
Yeah, and there are various approaches as well. There's a legalistic approach where you go and you get a party and you try to elect people, and there's a policy approach where you don't care what party's driving the policy as long as the community is forcing one of the two parties to drive the policy. But they're both necessary. Anybody that has listened to us together knows that I was up until recently regional coordinator here for this region, which I've only resigned because I'm moving out of this region.
With the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, with the Libertarian Party. And the reason I was in that is because I wanted to move the needle. And there are vessels out there and ways that you can participate and try to do that. And the Libertarian Party is one, and groups like Americans for Prosperity is another. And, real actual conservative Republican groups or constitutional groups may be beneficial as well. I mean, there are lots of different avenues.
Coalitions on issues we align on. I think
Absolutely.
that's the big thing. And I remember, I don't know, for people who never got to see the show, Justin is actually the person who got me to be involved in the Libertarian Party.
Don't forget, I got you to vote too.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about something positive. But he's the person who he convinced me to at least come into the party and try to work my magic somehow, whatever it is, contribute that way.
Whatever skill you got.
Yeah. And so that's something I've heard from you since that very first time we ever met, was that move the needle. We're just trying to move the needle. That's whenever I hear someone say move the needle, Justin pops into my mind because it's forever associated with you. But speaking of, kind of moving the needle, as we know, like you and I both, I think this is something that's kind of near and dear to both our hearts, is the Ruby Ridge massacre.
It's near and dear to my heart, like Manson was,
it was a terrible event, but for us, it's something that we want to recognize as very much state overreach.
Yeah, it's one of those horrible showcase things.
Yes, and it's the worst kind of egregious state overreach. And then you had Waco as well. But today is the anniversary, this week, sort of, because the standoff lasted for more than a few days, but of the whole Ruby Ridge fiasco, and where Vicki Weaver and Sammy Weaver and their dog Stryker were murdered by state agents on their own property.
That was way out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, in Idaho, and the Weaver family was really destroyed. And we're not going to go into all the details of that. I know we talked about it on the radio before, and we're both like, we get fired up over this. So, but I think it's just one aspect of, or an example of something that being brought up and say, this is why talking about these things is still important.
It is.
Because I've actually heard people say, well, we live in a free country. Why don't people spend so much time on politics? Because
those that forget history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah. And to realize that you are only free if you keep yourselves free.
Right. Well, I mean,
we're not all the way free, but
it's almost like, despite the fact that we've had 250 years of in the United States, that the population still doesn't understand that basic premise that you, in this country, the whole idea is that you get to control your life and I get to control my life, and you don't get to bug me and I don't get to bug you unless you actually hurt me or take something from
damage me in some way. Yeah.
I mean, and that's the way it was originally set up, with this limited framework that was only meant to make sure that your individual rights were protected. And that's it. They weren't supposed to be creating other rights. They weren't supposed to be doing any of that. All that should have been left up to the evolution of society.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't let society evolve, and then we complain because we have parasites in the system, or whatever you want to complain about.
Yeah, and you see it in both sides, the progressive and conservative sides of the coin, I guess. Yeah. In that they each want to talk about, especially the right. I like to give the right a hard time on this, because the conservative side, they talk all the time, talk all kinds of crap about the social justice warriors and the welfare queens and all that. And they have just as many on that side. They're just not called that. Like, so they often want to point out the mote in their brother's eye, but not the beam in their own, right?
It's a sad way. We place more interest on being right in our own minds than being right in real life.
Yeah, I actually had someone I know, a friend who her husband was in the military, and she this was several years ago, went to Home Depot, and she made this really long post about how horrible Home Depot was and how they hate the troops because they quit giving their 10% discount to the troops. And I thought, that if that's not welfare mentality, I don't know what is. That they owe you something because you went in the military, and that's the same kind of things that the right hates about the left.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't have a problem with businesses. I think more businesses should give discounts, but I think they should do it voluntarily.
But her whole complaint was that they deserve it because we fight for your freedoms, right? When they haven't fought for freedom in a long time.
Yeah.
So, her husband being in Afghanistan, like I feel for you that your husband's over there, but he shouldn't be over there in the first place. And nobody owes you anything because your husband decided to make that, that choice to go and be a order follower for the state.
Yeah.
I'm being nice.
I know.
But, I don't hate the people in the military. I just, I wish our military wasn't used in the way it is and that we didn't have a state apparatus like that.
I wish transparency was a real thing. I wish it wasn't just a buzzword that we talked about, and then we got a couple of FOIA papers back. So all of a sudden we're transparent, even though we're still hiding everything.
Right.
I mean, if you want, as the United States government, the consideration should be the Constitution calls for the people to govern themselves. If we want that to be the case, we should enable them to do so. Information's a huge part of that, I would argue.
Yes, and
troop movements maybe not so much.
Well, the thing is that the standing army, the way we have it now, is something that even Madison, who was not an anti-federalist, he didn't want a standing army either because he realized that it would lead to this kind of war machine that we have. And,
that as recently as Eisenhower, we had people speak out about in bold terms. And then, who knows, maybe we've been quiet since Kennedy for a reason.
There are people speaking out about it, but not many politicians anymore. I know Rand Paul probably, and Justin Amash maybe. What's the other guy?
Oh, there's a handful.
There's Massey that are speaking out. I don't know if I'd call them anti-war, but they're certainly trying to rein the government into its own rules because it doesn't even follow its own rules.
Right. I mean, these are the small group of people that are actually interested in having Congress declare a war,
which hasn't been done since World War II.
Yeah, I think that's right.
They haven't gotten congressional approval.
They either did or did not do Korea. That was either the first one they didn't or the last one they did. I can't remember which.
I don't think it was because I believe it's still technically a police action.
I think you're right.
So that's how they get around it. They call them police actions or
limited incursions.
Yeah, whatever. And it's not limited. It's like I was thinking about this the other day. The war in Afghanistan has been going on for longer than my 15-year-old son has been alive.
It's crazy.
My children have never known a time without this country being at war.
It's been going on, 4 times longer than World War II?
It's crazy. And
I bet it's cost more than World War II.
Oh,
I bet
easily.
I bet it's cost more than 4 times than World War II when we were at one point fighting the entire world, and now we've got this limited troop presence in Afghanistan, but I still bet that limited troop year over year it costs us more than year over year did.
And that's not to mention the cost to other countries and to the lives of people. Like the human cost is, you can't get that back.
And we haven't even made it to the opiate thing yet.
Yeah. So there's so many issues revolving around war, and you see this sort of really patriotic. This is the way I look at it. The state has replaced community with state worship.
It's
There's a false community around patriotism that used to be people taking care of each other in their own communities, and now, like, even we had an issue this week. My daughter has started a co-op 3 days a week, a homeschool co-op, and they say the pledge every morning. And Evie didn't want to say it, and a couple of the little kids in her class said, "You're not saying the pledge." And she said, "I don't want to." And they said, "You should say it if you know it." And so she said, "I just stood there a moment and I put my hand on my heart, but I didn't say it. I didn't want to say that. I don't want to worship that." So, she just turned 8 today.
your kid.
I know,
Whew.
and she's going to be something, but so we're going to have a little discussion with her school about that. But, just for second graders, the pressure on a little second grader to say it. Like, when I was a kid, I didn't even notice what other kids were doing, much less, but for them to look at her and say, "You're not saying the pledge and you need to say it." And they probably don't even really understand why. Their parents probably don't even understand why they do this. But, that's that false community. Like, you're an outsider now.
I mean, if you go back and you do like George Washington's farewell address, which I'm a big fan of, in that, he notes that the government does have the ability, or should have the ability, to court the affections of the people, is the way he puts it. I believe that's true. I just think they need to do it with truth.
Well, to court means that person still has the right to say no.
That's exactly right. That is 100% true. And I think that George Washington would have said the exact same thing.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with the government trying to inspire. Nationalism is not necessarily always every single time the worst thing in the entire world.
I think there's two kinds of nationalism. There's one which is a separatism.
There's all kinds of nationalism.
In the most general sense.
Well, I mean, nationalism centers around an idea of a culture or a society. And that idea of that culture or that society could be literally anything in the entire world. And when this country was founded, that idea was that this country was an exception, that this country was a place where people got to dictate their own paths, that this was a place where people, rugged individuals, were going to be the people that set the pace for this world. The people that went out and exerted the most effort were going to be the ones that got the most reward. That was the original idea of nationalism in this country. And if that's what nationalism looked like in this country now, you'd call me a nationalist.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's the case in this particular. It's been twisted like everything else.
Right. I think generally people, when they hear the word nationalism, they think of separatism, of probably white nationalism or black nationalism, kind of a dividing of people.
Or even just my country's better than your country because it's my country and not your country.
Because these lines outline where we live.
Do you see how pretty these lines are? Look at your lines.
Right.
You need to go on a diet.
Yeah. So, I think there's nothing wrong with being, like, pride of place. And this is what I think it surprised you on our last episode on the radio when I said, I'm proud to be an American. I really am. And I still think that there are a lot of great ideals that the country was founded on that hold true and are great ideals to have. I just don't think that has to be pushed on everyone else.
Along that line, I will always be eternally grateful to God that I was born in this country and not some other country. There is never going to be any question about that because this is the best country. However, the idea, daggone it, I forgot where I was going. The thing that makes this country great is the idea that people in small groups get to dictate their own paths. It was never the difference was every other country in the world had a monarchy, which is a command and control system from the top down. Where are we going now? we don't have that same American exceptionalism that we used to. And those that claim it diminish that message, because Ben Franklin said, "What kind of government do you
Right.
have? A republic, if you can keep it."
Right.
He said that to a lady on the street. He didn't say that to the person that was in charge or some people in the Continental Congress. He said it to somebody that was on the street.
Right.
That's the reality of the situation. If we want this, we can have it. But if you want to take your country back, the way to do it isn't to say, "That's the guy that I'm going to vote for, and he's
Right.
going to take our country back."
Exactly.
You got to get up off your own couch. You got to knock on your neighbor's door. You got to have a conversation
Yeah.
with them. That's the way we take our
A
country back.
conversation, not this yelling. And
Yeah.
and what happens a lot, I see, and I'm going to be doing a show tonight, be co-hosting on Liberty Weekly, and they're doing a series on that documentary. I don't know if you saw it on Netflix, Wild Wild Country, and it's about a religious group that moves into this small town. They're from India, and then they move into a town in Oregon, and the problems that arise. But most of the problems arise from these people that already live there see these other people who are minding their own business as outsiders, and instead of getting to know them and find out what they're about, they're just different and they don't like them.
Yeah.
And so it goes this back and forth. It starts this back and forth of escalating, eventually violence almost. And so you see where that polarizes people. So when you go and, yell at your neighbor, you won't even talk to them because they're this and you're that. And you separate yourself into these boxes instead of saying, what's our common goal? Is our common goal to all be, live the best life possible? Let's figure it out. And I know we have different ideas about where things should go, but I think subsidiarity, where small cities, small communities govern themselves. I think that's really what the founding fathers were going for. And then, whatever federal government should have no teeth whatsoever.
I mean, the message from the authoring of the Constitution was separation of powers and division of powers, and they wanted the smallest entity to have the most control over your life, because if you didn't like the way this town was running themselves, you just go next door to the other town that's running a different town.
Governance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I don't want to state, but I do think that people will always want to organize their communities. There will always be an organization of community, but it should really be like the old school system where you could go down to the school system and you could talk to the principal and you could affect change in your kid's school by just going and talking to the principal. Now, I don't even know who the people on the school board are. Of course, my kids don't go to public school, but I couldn't affect change in the system that way. But after the consolidated school districts,
they oversee how many thousand kids, and you expect them to stop just to talk to you?
Right. You become a number.
You pretentious, redheaded, liberty-loving person.
You can say the words. We're not on the radio. I know we got in the habit of that. Well, I guess just to sort of wrap it up here, I don't know if I ever asked you this before, but what made you get up off the couch? And I know that you and Josh restarted the Libertarian Party in this area. Mm-hmm. What made you guys get up and get off the couch and actually do something? Because there's a lot, it's called the Liberty Movement, but there's not always a lot of movement in that. So what inspired that?
Josh and I had dabbled in Recuro prior to the Libertarian thing, because, we had desire, but we weren't ready to get off office chairs at that particular point in time. And then I got to give you credit, Josh. Josh found a Libertarian Party meeting and said, "Hey, we should go to this." And I was like, "Okay." And we went, and opportunity to take a leadership role locally in the Libertarian Party presented itself there. So we took it and ran with it. Yeah. And so opportunity, I guess. The desire was always there. I just didn't really know how to get into it. Which, now looking back, there's so many different ways. Even the organization that I'm working for now is way in. There's so many different organizations out there, and most of them don't have huge memberships here locally, and you can have a conversation with them and volunteer time and make a difference. But you know, like say, the group that I'm with now, I think absolutely embodies all that stuff. So it's an easy transition for me
Mhm.
to go into this, especially after sitting 7 years in a cubicle.
Yeah, that job was killing you. I'm
Yeah.
so glad. I think you're going to be a real asset to AFP.
I
And
was going to murder somebody with one of those red staplers at some point.
it's my red stapler. Yeah, there are just. I think everyone has certain talents, and your talents were definitely being wasted in that particular job. And it was just like soul killing for you. So I think it's good that you're getting out into something that you're good at. I mean, that was one of the things that I know that the Libertarian Party here in Knoxville was really small when you guys first started,
It
you and
didn't
Josh.
exist.
Right. So you guys, I think you got up to the largest meeting in the country at one point. It may still be.
It's
I
still
don't know.
probably on average the largest
Yeah.
meeting.
So I mean that's people who can at least get people to come and listen. Like
Yeah.
that's what we need is more people listening.
Well,
And
you got to have people that understand that you're creating a storefront, though.
Mhm.
It's a sales job. So whatever you're doing, you're trying to appeal to people, and you want them to come in and walk around and take a look at your merchandise and see if there's something there they want to buy. So you got to go out and make friends. Don't pretend that you have all the answers and that you don't need people, because that's not going to do it.
There's a spectrum too. People starting out aren't going to be at the end
That's
where
right.
you've been after so many
That's
years.
right.
Like it takes a minute.
And you are the jerk if you try to hold them to that kind of standard or tell them they're not good enough.
Oh, are you calling me a jerk?
I mean, I wasn't.
I mean, I will definitely make a politician cry.
I know. God, that was.
I still don't think he
Sorry.
was crying.
I don't know if I believe the crime part either,
but he wouldn't talk to me after.
it was serious. It was close.
Yeah. My one beautiful moment at a Libertarian Party meeting, like grilling a Republican about violence. Yeah, and then it doesn't get on the live stream. So
I know, right?
The live stream was down, but yeah,
so terrible.
That was good.
That is, I do wish I had that moment.
Yeah, me too. Well, all right, guys. So Justin, where can we? Do you have your own AFP address? If people are in the Johnson City, it's a Tri-Cities area, so it's Johnson City.
No, Bristol, Kingsport.
Okay, so
really,
Johnson City, Bristol,
Greenville,
Kingsport. Okay.
Everything in that area.
That area of Northeast Tennessee.
Right.
So where can people reach you? Where can they reach AFP if they want to get involved?
I'm easy to find on Facebook. I'm friends with Sherry, so... I have an email. It's jcornett@afphq.com.
Spell your last name.
Cornett.
Okay. So that's how people could get a hold of you if they're in
Absolutely.
that area and want to get involved. And then, of course, you can find AFP just by looking online. They've got plenty of resources.
And if I knock on your door in the Tri-Cities area, open it and say hello to me.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, and then, guys, you can catch me I'm on Google Play Store now. That's a new addition. iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud. What am I forgetting, Daniel? TuneIn. Yes, on TuneIn. So you can say, hey, Alexa, play Sherry Voluntary. If you have the TuneIn, is it an app? On Alexa?
That's
and
cool.
I know. I'm cool, right?
Moving on up.
Yeah. So you can catch me there. You can catch the Sherry Voluntary Show on Facebook and YouTube, as well as my newest show, which is Postcards from Somalia. And it is a lot of fun, and it is very irreverent. So be ready for that. And we will catch you guys next week. Peace.